Multiplying matrices by me, Ashton Liam. So let's ask the age-old question. What is a matrix? Sorry for the bad drawing. A matrix is a rectangle, box, or square with variables, numbers, or etc. It depends on the matrix. Now, let's have an example. So, for example, let's have A times B. A is equal to this matrix, which is 2, 0, 1, 8. And B is equal to this matrix, which is 0, 1, 2, 4. Okay, so let me just tell you this now. You cannot rearrange these numbers. When these numbers are here, they're here. You cannot change them. So you can't have, like, let's say you can't have A equal to 2, 1, 0, 8. Like, you swap the A and 0 and 1. No, you can't have that. You can't do that. It will mess up your solution later on. You'll see why later. Now, how do we multiply these matrices? Well, we can see A has 2 rows and 2 columns, and B has 2 rows and 2 columns as well. So it's a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 2. Now, the way you can see that this isn't undefined is by looking at the number of columns. So A has 2 columns, and looking at the amount of rows the second variable has. So B has 2 rows. If these 2 numbers match each other, then you can multiply the matrices. And when you can, the way you know how many variables or numbers there are in a matrix is by taking the amount of rows in the first variable. So A has 2 rows. And you take the amount of columns in the second variable. So there's 2 columns. And so your solution should be a 2 by 2. Now let's say B has 3 rows instead of 2. Oh, let's look at that. So let's say it's still A times B. So 2 by 2 times a 3 by 2. Okay, so 2 columns in A, but oh no, there's 3 rows in B. Since these 2 numbers don't match, you cannot multiply the matrices together. So your matrix or your solution would be undefined. And so if it's undefined, meaning you can't multiply them out, it's physically impossible. But the story would change if instead of A times B, it'd be B times A. So let's say it's B times A. So it's a 3 by 2 times a 2 by 2. Well, what do you know? The amount of columns in the first variable is equal to the amount of rows in the second variable. So 2 by 2, and you would take the amount of rows in the first variable and then the number of columns in the second variable, add them together, or you put them together, and your solution should be a 3 by 2. Now that that's out of the way, let's do the actual problem. So A equals 2, 0, 1, 8, and B equals 0, 1, 2, 4. And the problem is, what is A times B? Okay, so how do you multiply this out? The way we multiply this out, you take the first row of the first variable and you multiply by the first column of the second variable. So it may be confusing, but you'll see how it works. And to clear up confusion, you don't do anything like FOILing this out. Like, you don't FOIL out like 2 times 0, 2 times plus 2 times 2, 1 times 0 plus 1 times 2. No, you just take the first number, so in this case of the row, which is 2, you would multiply it by 0. So it's 2 times 0, and you add that with what 0 times 2 is. So 2 times 2. And obviously this equals 0, and this equals 0, and 0 plus 0 equals 0. For the second variable, you would take the first row again, so 2, 0 in this case, and you'd multiply by the second column of the second variable. So in this case, it'd be 2 times 1 plus 0 times 4. 0 times 4 equals 0, and 2 times 1 equals 2. You add them together, you get 2. So your second solution is 2. Now, when we get to the bottom row, it's a totally different story. Forget the first column, or forget the first row now. It's all about the second row now. So you take the second row, and I think you can already guess that we do the same process. So take the second row, and you multiply it by the first column. So 1 times 0 plus 8 times 2. 1 times 0 equals 0, and 8 times 2 is 16. Add 0 and 16, and you get 16. And now, finally, to get the last thing, you take the last column, and you multiply it by the last row. Sorry, last row by last column. So it would be 1 times 1 plus 8 times 4. 1 times 1 equals 1, and 8 times 4 equals 32. You add 1 and 32 together, and you get 33. So your solution should be 0, 2, 16, 33. Keep in mind you cannot change the order of any of this, and same thing goes for the variable. This works the same thing if it's b times a, but I'm sure you get a different solution. In fact, we'll try it. How about we try it later? But right now, we can see that it's 2 times 2. Or 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And you get a 2 by 2. So a times b equals 0, 2, 16, 33. And that's basically all you need to know. I'm sure b times a, however, is totally different because you're multiplying different factors by different factors. And that's about it. So like you'd multiply 0, 1, and 2, 1. Well, that's it. So thank you for watching, and this is Multiplying Matrices by Ashton Leon. Thank you.